Reflections. Why the Mind Matters in Christianity, Part 2. Excerpts from Love Your God with All Your Mind, The Role of Reason in the Life of the Soul, by J.P. Morland. Part 1 of this series looked at how conservative American Christianity responded to intellectual challenges in the 1800s by withdrawing from public discourse and constructing an anti-intellectual understanding of the Christian faith. This reaction resulted in a marginalized church with a softer influence on Christ, as well as a secular culture. Part 2 of this series will go into how secular society has influenced modern Christian thought and what we can do to counteract its influence on our Christ-like mindset. Secular views of knowledge are responsible for unfortunate social trends. One prominent secular view of knowledge, responsible for a number of unfortunate contemporary trends in society, is scientism. First, in our scientifically oriented culture, traditional understandings of morality and related notions are considered passé. The primary trend in ethical thinking today is toward moral and religious relativism. If ethics and religion are not considered to be scientifically testable, then many today will think they are mere expressions of belief that are true only for those who believe them. Science claims to deal only with fact. Religion and ethics supposedly deal with feelings and privatized values. Therefore, religion and ethics are considered merely subjective notions in modern society. Another modern trend is a change in what we mean by the good life. From Old Testament times and ancient Greece until this century, the good life was widely understood to mean a life of intellectual and moral virtue. The good life is the life of ideal human functioning, according to the nature that God Himself gave to us. According to this view, prior to creation, God had in mind an ideal blueprint of human nature, from which He created each and every human being. Happiness, translated in Greek, eudaimonia, was understood as a life of virtue, and the successful person was one who knew how to live life well, according to what we are by nature, due to the creative design of God. When the Declaration of Independence says we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them the right to pursue happiness, it is referring to virtue and character. So understood, happiness involves suffering, endurance, and patience, because these are important means to becoming a good person who lives the good life. Freedom was traditionally understood as the power to do what one ought to do. For example, some people are not free to play the piano or to say no to lust because they have not undergone the training necessary to ingrain the relevant skillful habits. Moreover, since community is possible only if people accept as true a shared vision of the good life, it is easy to see why a sense of community and public virtue could be sustained given this understanding of the good life, happiness, and freedom. Traditionally, tolerance of other viewpoints meant that even though I think those viewpoints are dead wrong and will argue against them fervently, nevertheless, I will defend your right to argue your own case. Just as importantly, I will treat you with respect as an image bearer of God, even though your views are abhorrent to me. Finally, while individual rights are important, they do not exhaust the moral life, because virtue and duty are more central than rights to the moral life properly conceived. Unfortunately, this traditional understanding of the good life, freedom, community, and tolerance is not scientifically testable. Moreover, Darwin's theory of evolution caused many to lose their belief in the existence of natures, human or otherwise. As Harvard zoologist Ernst Mayr has said, the concepts of unchanging essences and of complete discontinuities between every eidos, type, and all others make genuine evolutionary thinking impossible. I agree with those who claim that the essentialist philosophies of Aristotle and Plato are incompatible with evolutionary thinking. This belief has, in turn, led evolutionary thinkers like David Hull to make the following observation. The implications of moving species from the metaphysical category that can appropriately be characterized in terms of natures to to a category for which such characterizations are inappropriate are extensive and fundamental. If species evolve in anything like the way that Darwin thought they did, then they cannot possibly have the sort of natures that traditional philosophers claimed they did. If species in general lack natures, then so does Homo sapiens as a biological species. If Homo sapiens lacks a nature, then no reference to biology can be made to support one's claims about human nature. Perhaps all people are persons, share the same personhood, etc., but such claims must be explicated and defended with no reference to biology. Because so many moral, ethical, and political theories depend on some notion or other of human nature, Darwin's theory brought into question all these theories. The implications are not entailments. One can always dissociate Homo sapiens from human being, but the result is a much less plausible position. Note Hull's comment that if a person or group dissociates the species-specific designation Homo sapiens from the designation human being, with all of its attendant moral and theological implications, then that person or group has a less plausible position. Why? Why should that which we see, hear, feel, taste, or touch, or observe through scientific method, have sway over any cultural debate, since Hull's entire conclusion rests on the giant if? If species evolve in anything like the way that Darwin thought they did. Yet, as we'll see in the next section, we have allowed secular thinkers to frame the debate, and the Christian voice has been muffled at best. What Mayer and Hull are saying is that if naturalistic evolution is the story of how we came to be, then there is no human nature answering to a divine blueprint, and no good life that expresses that nature. There are only accidentally formed individual human beings who are free to create whatever version of happiness they wish. According to the modern view, the good life is the satisfaction of any pleasure or desire that someone freely and autonomously chooses for himself or herself. The successful person is the individual who has a life of pleasure and can obtain enough consumer goods to satisfy his or her desires. Freedom is the right to do what I want, not the power to do what I by nature ought to. Community gives way to individualism, with the result that narcissism, an inordinate sense of self-love and self-centered involvement, is an accurate description of many people's lives.
Alright, y'all gotta give it up for the #1 artist in the country singing her new smash hit, It's All About Me.
It's all about, it's all about me.
Y'all know I'm fine, 'cause I work hard to get to this point in my life. I'm blowing up, so don't hate, just congratulate.
The whole world revolves around me. I'm a princess, a diva, and it's all about me.
Me, it's all about me. 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 It's all about me.
It's all about, it's all about me.
If I am free to create my own moral universe and version of the good life, and there is no right or wrong answer to what I should create, then morality, indeed everything, ultimately exists to make me happy. When a person considers abortion or physician-assisted suicide, the person's individual rights are all that matter. Questions about virtue or one's duty to the broader community simply do not arise. Tolerance has come to mean that no one is right and no one is wrong. And indeed, the very act of stating that someone else's views are immoral or incorrect is now taken to be intolerant. Of course, from this same point of view, it is all right to be intolerant of those who hold to objectively true moral or religious positions. Once the existence of knowable truth in religion and ethics is denied, Authority, the right to be believed and obeyed, gives way to power, the ability to force compliance. Reason gives way to rhetoric. The speechwriter is replaced by the make-up man, and spirited but civil debate in the culture wars is replaced by politically correct special interest groups who have nothing left but political coercion to enforce their views on others. While the Christian faith clearly teaches that believers are to be involved as good citizens in the state, nevertheless, it is obvious why so many secularists are addicted to politics today, because political power is a surrogate for a higher power. As Friedrich Nietzsche said, once God died in Western culture, that is, once the concept of God no longer informed the major idea-generating centers of society turned secular, there would be turmoil and horrible secular wars unchecked by traditional morality, because the state would come to be a surrogate God for many. Finally, individual rights have come to dominate our public discussion of moral issues. The public square, those aspects of society where all citizens must interface regardless of personal views, for example, public schools and government, has become naked. Religious, moral, and political debate therein is no longer informed by a clear, robust vision of the moral life shared by most citizens and taken to be true and rational. Once objective duty, goodness, and virtue were abandoned under the guise of scientism and secularism, the only moral map that could replace objective morality is what Daniel Callahan has called minimalistic ethics. Anything is morally permissible provided only that you do not harm someone else. Individual rights are important, and, for the Christian, they are grounded in the image of God and not in the state. In other words, the Christian believes that human rights are derived from the image of God in us. They do not ultimately come from the state. But there are more fundamental questions of virtue and duty that are relevant to the overall development of a moral outlook. For example, the abortion debate should not be framed primarily as a debate about the right to life versus the right to choice. Basically, it should be discussed in terms of this question: what does a woman or a community committed to moral virtue and duty do when faced with the question of abortion? The tenor of the debate changes drastically when issues of virtue and duty to others is brought to the foreground and rights are relegated to a secondary position in the moral context. Until Christians can do a better job of seeing these issues and articulating them in terms of objective duty and virtue, the Jack Kevorkians will continue to win the debate, if that is what we should call the media rhetoric that surrounds the framing of moral dilemmas, precisely because the Kevorkians are on the side of individual rights. If the only morally relevant question to ask a patient is whether or not he freely and competently chooses physician-assisted suicide, then we are left with no moral categories in which to introduce more basic questions of duty and virtue. And this is where our secular society is at present, given its commitment to scientism that emerged in no small measure because a marginalized and inarticulate church withdrew into privatized religion as she welcomed the Trojan horse of anti-intellectualism within her walls. If you are like I am, your heart may be saddened by what you have seen and heard in this video. As disciples of Jesus Christ, we must ask how we can become the kind of people we need to be to bring honor to Christ, to help turn the culture toward Him, and to be lights in the midst of darkness for our families, friends, churches, and communities. There is no simple answer to this question, but one thing is crystal clear. We must rededicate ourselves to being deeply spiritual people, of whom it can truly be said that Christ is formed in you, Galatians 4:19. And given the times in which we live, we must also obey Jesus' admonition to be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves, Matthew 10:16. Wisdom is the application of knowledge gained from studying both God's written word and His revealed truth in creation. If we are going to be wise, spiritual people prepared to meet the crises of our age, we must be a studying, learning community that values the life of the mind. Surrounded by a fragmented culture, how do we become deeply spiritual people who are wise and savvy, yet innocent and pure? How do we raise children, develop good marriages, serve as role models at work, and make an attractive impact on our communities. More than ever before, we need what the Old Testament calls wisdom. The spiritually mature person is a wise person, and a wise person has the savvy and skill necessary to lead an exemplary life and to address the issues of the day in a responsible, attractive way that brings honor to God. In closing, I want to repeat that I am neither adequate for, nor do I have space to conduct, a full analysis of what has happened to the culture and the church. Obviously, more is going on here than a changed perspective of the intellectual life. But we as Christians must face the main fact of this video series, to wit. Due to certain forces in the 1800s, conservative American Christianity responded to intellectual attack by withdrawing from public discourse and developing an anti-intellectual view of the Christian faith. This response created both a marginalized church with a softened impact for Christ and a secular culture. English professor Carolyn Kane wrote an article in Newsweek about the loss of thinking in American culture generally. After putting her finger squarely on the problem, Kane identified her solution in front of both God and the Newsweek readership. But how can we revive interest in the art of thinking? The best place to start would be in homes and churches of our land. It is striking that she did not appeal to government, or for more money for public schools or better college facilities. Instead, she identified the church as the key factor. Perhaps Kane has a better grasp of the importance of the intellectual life in the Christian faith than many of us do. Perhaps she has read enough scripture to know that the church was meant to be, and has often been, the instrument of reason in society.